represented by my good friend Mauricia Harry. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about this law that was passed in the New York City Council about the different levels of police stops. These type of things affect our community in a large and profound manner because it can oftentimes lead to a very bad outcome for our communities, especially the way we are policed. In addition to understanding what the components are and what the police can and what they cannot do during these particular levels of stops. And we have someone here that works with the Office of Community Liaison that's going to lay that out for you and give you a little bit more understanding about what each particular level is, what the police can and cannot do, and how, a lot of times, we should respond if we come up against being stopped. Because oftentimes, it does not end good for us. But if you have the knowledge of how you respond in certain circumstances, a lot of times, what normally can be a bad situation does not necessarily have to happen. So without further ado, I will do a quick intro. Mostly everybody know who I am. My name is Victor Pate. I am a formerly incarcerated person. I spent over 15 years of my life in and out New York State prisons and jails. I've been home for 25 years now, and the work that I've done since 25 years has always been focused on prisons and jails, legislative criminal justice laws, and how they treat our brothers and sisters in our prisons and jails. My job, I am the co-director of the Halt Solitary Confinement Coalition, which is a criminal justice legislative advocacy coalition that advocated for 9 years to get a bill passed in the New York State Legislature in 2021 that ended the ability of the New York State prisons to keep people in long-term solitary confinement. And that happened in 2020, and the bill was implemented in the New York State prisons and jails in 2021.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. That's Victor Pate, a family member, back on the Gilchrist Experience. Welcome home, Victor, and your teammate is also with you on on Zoom. Welcome.
Thank you for the
Marcia, if you introduce yourself and tell us what your part of this session was. It was quite informational. What I was most concerned with is how the cameras operate on that Robert Brooks video that we've seen and will show today. But welcome to the show, Marcia.
Mauricia.
How are you?
Mauricia.
And tell us the basic principles of your presentation that day.
Okay, so my name is Mauricia. I am from Brooklyn. I am the Manhattan organizer for the Office of the Community Liaison. So our office was appointed by the federal courts, and a federal judge 13 years ago, they found that the NYPD was out of compliance and they violated a lot of rights with stop, question, and frisk due to Black and brown communities having stops that had no probable cause. So as a result, I'm sure you guys have been part of the movement to stop and frisk. There was enough evidence as the community rallied up and they became the plaintiffs to hold some type of accountability around it. So as of now, stop and frisk is legal, but there's still certain policies and parameters before somebody gets stopped or searched. Our office, we're appointed aside with the monitor because obviously after they found out that the NYPD was having a lot of stops that were self-initiated and unconstitutional, that they needed to have a monitor similar to the monitor that's on Rikers. So there's surveillance looking over these things. And as we know, stop and frisk has been around for a while, but there's a lot of work before it even improves. So that's the reason why the monitor is still in place. But our office, we're appointed to go through our community in all five boroughs and gain feedback, build relationship, and gain feedback on what's going on around police stops. If there's specific units or precincts that are flagging because they're stopping people rapidly and for no kind of reason. These are things that we need to tell to the judge. If there are things in certain areas where there are precincts that's working well, we go back and tell the judge so that she has some type of reformative process with the partnership of the monitor.
Hmm. You know what's interesting about this uh, stop and frisk, which we experienced for years, is what's happening to political people today. For instance, yesterday our controller was stopped in court, and we know ICE is they're gangsters. That's all. They're probably most of them are Proud Boys, or most of the people that have been Trump Trump's gang, right? The Proud Boys that were pardoned for the January 6th attack. But this is happening all over the place. But what I most liked about your presentation, you were giving to the youth what they should do when stopped by the police. Now, I often wonder what would happen to Khalif Browder if he had some of that education. So what you said was so informative to all of us. I'm an old man, and I got a lot out of it. So you have to understand your work is well needed throughout the community. So I loved your presentation, and that's why I have you on today. So I often think of Khalif Browder, and what if he had known some of that? Graham and I were talking about it, but they stole or snatched him up. But still, if he had known how to handle that, I mean, what would have happened? I mean, understand your brother's in prison himself and going through this solitary confinement, which Victor and I and Khalif Browder fought 3 years about. And so tell us a little bit about that. What got you into this?
Right. So there's always a storyline. Most of us don't ever get picked and say we want to be a community organizer, we want to be an activist. We go through some tough trials and some dark times to get where we are. So that's a small snippet of my story, but I am the oldest. It's been me and my brother. That's just the two of us, born to Caribbean parents. And meanwhile, we have similarities with family dynamic. My brother was diagnosed at the age of 3 with oppositional defiancy disorder. So when we look at labels and learn all these different mental health labels, at the time in 2003, they weren't where they are right now with mental health. So his oppositional defiancy disorder is a disorder where a child doesn't respect authority. And as a parent, my mom and my father,
Okay.
when a child doesn't respect authority, it's deemed as being disrespectful or a bad child. So rather than getting help from the resources, because we know sometimes resources where they are at now, but we had more back then, but there were still gaps. So therapy and things of that nature were recommended, but they weren't as helpful because his oppositional defiancy was really high. There was nothing you can get him to follow from the age of 3. However, because my parents come from the islands, coming to America and understanding the structure is not something that they understand the way we do. I even still struggle because the way they are meant to believe law enforcement is to correct and discipline. So oftentimes when my parents couldn't get my brother to follow instruction and he would have like these outbursts, threatening to call the police was something.
What?
assuming that a
Is
child
that
would be
Caribbean?
fearful, but he wasn't fearful because he had that disorder. Um, After pretty much getting police involved and the police realized that his family would call the cops because they didn't have control, it turned into policing being very aggressive when he was outside with his friends. Thankfully, my brother has had a really good legal team that's represented him from since he was 12 when these things started to get really out of hand. And for the most part, they've got him into programs and things of that nature. A lot of the police stops were unconstitutional. So instead of shedding light on his reaction, a lot of those cases got dismissed. However, we know how it goes with law enforcement. When you hold them accountable and you show that they didn't follow the book, it gets even a little bit more worse. So even after that, they continue to police him aggressively, just stop him and knowing that he's not going to have that great encounter because he's defiant. They came with an indictment, a gang indictment. And in that process, I learned that there was a gang database, which pretty much now I'm very much equipped and understand what that database entails and how they use it to target our community. And as a result, when it comes to conspiracy and things of that nature, you can't get out of that. There's nothing like a lawyer can fight for you to get lesser time, but there's no way to get out of that. So that was pretty much the way how they got him in, because instead of trying to cure or provide resources, they used it to punish.
Usually, the black way, if you act up, you got smacked around. I mean, in my day, I mean, if you act up and didn't have any control of yourself, you got a
But
whipping.
this is the thing, though, with oppositional defiancy, I was brought up that way as well. So you get behind beat, but there's some children that they don't learn through that; they get worse. So it was one of those that physically hitting him or disciplining him wasn't going to work. It made it worse.
You know, I had a case years ago, a young fellow had in the office, and he might have been about 12. And he would just laugh. He just started laughing. I said, you know, we're not cracking jokes here. What you did is something serious. We got a hold of his parent. The parent came in, and she explained to me. She said, he has a disorder, and when he's scared, he will laugh.
Ah, okay.
So we also knew that women during the prenatal stages, women that I believe drank, their children would do something, like if they committed a robbery, and they'd still be hanging around when the police showed up. Anybody with a normal level of reasoning said, well, let me rob this person, I'm going to run.
And leave.
But they would still be there. I had a woman right here on 42nd Street and 8th Avenue came up to me and a partner early one morning, and she's walking with a guy, and the woman comes over and she says, he raped me. But we saw the two of them walking down the mezzanine of the subway station together. And it did turn out the guy did rape her, but he had a psychological disorder.
Ooh,
Right? So
he thought it was all right.
and this is back in the 80s, you
Oh,
know,
okay.
not present time where people are talking about mental health.
Yeah.
But a lot of cops, when they encounter people, and I always tell, when we did stop and frisk, what to do when stopped. In the stop and frisk sessions, we would tell children, this is a game of psychology. Cops have to feel that they're in control of the situation.
Yes.
You have to maintain control of yourself.
Okay.
Let them assume that they're in control, but always be in control of yourself. And don't let them bait you into a higher level of interaction. You can't prove your manhood on the corner. You can't prove it by cursing and carrying on.
Right.
Just maintain your cool.
That's it.
Use your head. Even at the Million Youth March, working with Khalid Muhammad, we told his people, this is going to be a game of psychology. They're going to try and goat you into a situation.
Yeah,
So it's not about proving who you are, it's about being smart
that's it.
Yeah. I
and
agree.
completing your task as opposed to them completing their task. And I've been stopped. I got stopped in Jamaica many years ago. I think I was about 17. And I noticed the police were following me. And ultimately they stopped. I said, well, I was wondering when you were going to stop me. But there had been a robbery. And they asked me, do you mind if we pat you down? They said, pat. I said, no, you can pat me down. And they patted me and they found a chunk of metal. It was a pair of vice grips, wasn't a weapon. And they said, well, you've been walking a long distance. I said, yeah, because the bus runs once an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning, so I can walk from Jamaica.
Okay.
I was in Hollis painting my friend's house. I said, I can walk to Jamaica and get the train quicker than I can standing around waiting for the bus.
Yeah.
I said, white people walk from the East Coast to the West Coast. I said,
Doesn't
you know,
seem suspicious then.
you're right. I said, that's what y'all were doing, walking across the country. I'm walking across the county. You know, but the two cops, they were cool. And that was back in the 60s. But
Right.
today it's an
Different
entirely
world.
different
Different world.
element.
But that's just to even tell you, like, thank you for that insight because it shows like how, yes, that was a while ago, but it's still similar now because though exactly what you just said, before there was a monitorship, that would have somewhat been a bad stop, and I'll tell you why. Although there was a robbery, first of all, was there a detailed description that
Right.
was provided?
Right.
Because when we're stopping someone, they ask on the dispatch for a description. So was the description your description at the time?
More
Like,
than
I
male
don't
black.
know. But that was a bad stop as far as that. They should have told you whether you fit the description or not because it sounded like, and data has shown back in the times that people were just stopped because they were black and there was a robbery. That's not enough reason to stop and search someone. They did do well by informing you of why they stopped you, of asking for consent and frisking you first before searching you.
They didn't
So
search
those
me.
are
They
things
did.
that
They did.
worked well. And that's what I basically have a conversation with the youth so that they can know how to basically speak up for themselves without getting their egos involved.
Yes, they were. And I noticed them following me because I was window shopping on Jamaica Avenue as I was going home. So I said to the officer, I said, if I had robbed somebody, do you think I'd be window shopping on Jamaica Avenue? You know, and he looked at his partner like, yeah, duh, you know. But they were cool. I had another incident. I was running up the street. I got to the corner, and I ran into a cop, physically. He had his gun in his hand.
Whoa.
Yeah, he had his gun in his hand, and he said, I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. He said, no. He says, get on the other side. There might be shots being fired. Somebody was burglarizing a building. And he did not overreact to the situation. We collided at the
But
corner
that
of
could
the,
have went
of the
left
building.
instantly.
Black cop?
No, white cop.
White cop.
This was in the 75th precinct. Back
Oh.
in the
East New
60s,
York?
again.
Ooh.
And he was cool. He wasn't one of these trigger-happy cops and one of these young guys out here today
Yeah,
that'll shoot
yeah,
anything
yeah.
because
They
they're scared.
Yeah.
He said, no, it's not about you. He said, get on the other side of Atlantic Avenue because shots may be fired. And I got across Atlantic Avenue. I looked back, you know, and I kept going where I was going. But he was very cool. But I did have, at age 7, a cop that hit me with a nightstick. And Danny Kaye, the entertainer, was coming to do a show at the school because he grew up around the corner on Bradford Street in East New York. And I looked at this cop, you know, I looked at him, and I was standing there with my sister, and I said, I wish my father was still alive. Because if my father was alive, I'd have gone home to get him. And that would have been another story.
You were 7 at the time?
7.
Okay.
7. So I didn't like cops from that point on, you know.
You became one yourself.
And I became one because I figured I could do the job better than some of the people that were doing the job.
Okay.
You know, and it did work. You know, but when we wrote What to Do and Stop by the Frisk by the Police back in, wow, Cliff and I wrote that back in the late 80s, early 90s. You know, we were doing what you're doing. Going to schools, community centers, churches, and just teaching people. And the stop and frisk statute has changed over the years. I've only done, in my entire career, about a half a dozen stops.
Half a dozen in
Just
20 years?
Out of about 500 arrests, maybe a half a dozen. But there was one guy, we were informed he had the gun, we knew he had the gun, but we still did it by this,
By the book.
do it by the book. And we had a roll call on that morning. And we worked in plain clothes, didn't work in uniform. So I'm not going to give the whole story, but I say, hey, brother, can I talk to you? Because he was shocked when I showed him my ID. He thought I was one of his hood rats. And he just went for it. He went for his gun. He didn't make it. He survived. He was hurt. But we did it by the numbers that the sergeant said. And he just escalated. He went from he went from 0 to 100 real quick. But there were other people I've stopped 3 people were FBI agents. They wanted to know, how did I know they had a gun? I said, I'm a professional at what I do. Another fellow was carrying license. He looked like he was 15, but he was 27, and he was an armed guard in the morning rush hour on the IRT. But stop and frisk was not something that we did. We did proactive work catching people in the act of committing the crime.
All right, let's hear from you some of these pointers you were giving the young people at your presentation. What are some of the things that kids should be doing when police stop them? They might not run into a gram. You know what I mean? Nobody follows the rules nowadays, like ICE. Now, what advice would you give to somebody today? The way it is with the ICE people, I mean, they're giving allegiance to all the other police officers out here, who might be racist or Proud Boys or vendetta, or looking to beat up any Democrat they see. A Trumper.
So, my office, we don't deal with ICE specifically, but the questions have arisen, is NYPD working with them? And the answer is no. They cannot. They just simply cannot. However...
You're saying they can't arrest you?
NYPD is not working
has nothing to do with ICE.
Right.
And immigration, they cannot ask you for ID because they want to know if you're a citizen or not. They cannot. That's not NYPD's jurisdiction.
Okay.
They simply cannot.
All right.
However, my advice to the youth when interacting or being stopped, having an encounter with the officers, the biggest thing, which the youth are most times when the stop is right or incorrect, because of the fear, the egos, they're right about their feelings. They just don't know how to articulate it right. So I think the biggest thing is understanding the language and the lingo. None of us wanted to be officers. Some may want to be officers, but you're right, as just a civilian of the community, I feel, is just to know how different systems work, how does law enforcement work, so you know how to abide by it. When it comes to stops, I think the biggest thing is knowing why you're stopped,
Right.
and asking that question, because that is in the Right to Know Act, where they have to let you know the reason for stop. In addition to letting you know the reason for stop, at all times, whether it was a right stop or incorrect stop, that Right to Know Act, it stresses that officers should provide business cards when requested and even if not requested. Level 1 interactions make it different only because it's a general conversation and interaction. But aside from that, when an officer asks the youth to search them, I think that's where they feel violated. Like, what did I do? Even though there may have been something that came through the dispatch that the youth don't really know what's going on because they're not on the force. But the biggest thing is asking, what is the reason for the stop? Because once you understand that and you know your levels, you will understand what questions to ask next. Well, I declined this search or this frisk, because we know at a level 2 you can decline because they're supposed to ask for consent. At a level 1 there shouldn't even be reason for search. At a level 3 now, there's not a consent thing because there's more reasonable suspicion. So these are the things that very much are important for the youth to know, because I think out the gate, when it happens, all of the emotions and tensions come from them not knowing why they're stopped, don't want to be touched and not understand why they're being touched. Sometimes it's embarrassment because community is seeing it, or, just certain things. People have personal boundaries. So just expressing it as clear as I just did for the youth, I think that's the biggest deal when being stopped by the police, so that we can have a de-escalation on both ends.
Also, you can't be detained against your will unless you're being arrested. Now,
Correct.
you may not choose to want to engage. You're walking down the street, you can keep walking. Or we can walk and talk, but I'm not stopping. I have somewhere to go. Now, if you're in a public space, you can be inquired as to your reason for being there. Well, it's very simple. People are coming and going through their daily course of life. So you can't get from point A to point B without going down the street. So there's no suspicion in that. And if you don't want to stop, officer, I don't have time. Thank you. Keep moving. Unless they're going to restrain you.
How would that have worked with you?
Well, I had the option of going. See, I knew they were following me when I was there.
No, I'm talking about you as a cop.
Oh,
And you were about to stop somebody, and
Well,
they said, I don't have time to talk to you. And
well, let's take the incident
What would
with
you have done?
Jerome Murchison, the guy with the gun. We received information from reliable sources. The guy not only was carrying a gun, but he was right-handed, and the gun was on the left side of his body, butt
But
facing out.
you knew he had a gun.
Right. So he wasn't going anywhere.
I'm talking about a regular person walking down the street, and you're being stopped, and the guy doesn't want to be questioned.
I have two options: let him go, or tell him you cannot move. And if I restrain him, I have to fill out a form.
Okay.
And this is another thing. Eric Adams said it was too much paperwork. That's nonsense.
Yeah.
That's nonsense.
You just confirmed that paperwork is
It's
essential
nonsense.
and you guys were doing it.
I was a cop before Eric was even in the police department.
He knows Eric well.
I know him. I knew him when he was a rookie. I had to sit him down and give him some instruction. The fact is, whatever paperwork, when you arrest somebody, there's plenty of paperwork to do. Filling out a 250, it's not a big deal. The thing with the 250 and why the police didn't want to do it is that, number one, it showed racial profiling. That's the biggest thing. They don't do stop and frisk in white neighborhoods, but there is crime in white neighborhoods. There's a
Correct.
lot of crime in white neighborhoods. Number two, you cannot summarily just stop any white person on the street unless you have real, just cause. Because if you do that, you're going to wind up in a court.
Yep.
Black people do not take the time to exercise their constitutional
Yeah,
rights when
'cause they
they're
don't know.
violated. All right? So
They don't know.
I saw a man that was searching his car. Cops can't search your car without a warrant. Unless there were the exigent circumstances that the crime was committed, you jumped in the car, and you were being pursued.
So you're speeding down the road, and a cop stops you.
Can't search your car.
No, that's
Can't search.
a moving violation, and they can give you a summons.
Right.
But to
have
actually
to have a
search, till you
warrant
step
to
out,
search
search
the
the
vehicle.
trunk, glove compartment, absolutely not.
Have to have a warrant.
But they
So,
do that all the time.
I saw a man on Sheffield Avenue near Atlantic Avenue, on Georgia, near Atlantic. So I parked my car and I'm watching these cops. And they're taking his things out of the trunk, his construction helmet, everything. They're putting on his helmet, they laughing and carrying on. And then they tell him at some point, okay, you can go. And all of his stuff is on the sidewalk. And they get in their car and drive off. So I give him my ID. I said, why did they stop? He says, I don't know. West Indian guy, I don't know. They just pulled me over and they asked me what I had. And then they go through my car. I said, what? Your civil rights, your constitutional safeguards were violated. I gave him my card.
Did they have dreads?
No. So I said, I will work with you because you have grounds for a lawsuit here. No, I don't want to be bothered. I said, oh man, come on.
Yeah.
I said, see, and they play on the immigrant population
Yeah.
all the time. Two anti-crime cops, 2 o'clock in the morning on Beverly Road. I'm going west, they're going east, and they're riding, you know. So the guy looks at me, and I look at him the same way. I'm going in the opposite direction. They go down to the corner, they make a U-turn, they come back. I make a left on Nostrand, and now they come after me and pull me over. Guy comes with the flashlight. Hey, Dread.
You had dreads?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I said, it's Mr. to you. Who do you think you are? Oh, I know why you stopped me, because I looked at you the same way you were looking at me, and I can look at you any way I want to look at you. You're out here thinking you run the streets. You don't run the streets.
You were a cop
So-
at the time.
Yeah, I was a detective. So, well, you know, I said, listen, man, you're going to get yourself into a hole you can't get out of, and I'm the person that'll throw the dirt on you. Go back to your car and find something to do with yourself. I tinned him. I said, and get out of here real fast. Oh, sir, yeah. I said, see, I never identified myself because I want to see how you're going to treat me. Because you treat me this way, I know you're treating the next black person that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd rather you mistreat me so I can take you into court and do you. And I did a few cops. Tell me, I'm running, I must have done something. I see white people running in New York. I don't see cops chasing them. But the thing is, our people need to know their rights, and they have to take the time to pursue the matter. It's not about at the moment, it's in the future.
Yes.
And I was so annoyed when that man just said, no, man, forget it, forget. I said, listen, don't worry about your immigration status. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
You have rights in this country.
Yeah.
But he would not file a complaint.
Yeah.
And I can't file a complaint
And you know
without a complainant.
People are doing
And
that.
I can share insight on that just coming from Caribbean parents. Like, they don't come from a structure where you file reports in their country. Like, there's rare accountability. Accountability in the country looks like violence. So it's tough when you're like pushing and you have immigrants that the police, they prey on and they literally don't want to follow through. So I can definitely understand where you were coming from with that.
We had the same thing in the Asian community when I worked on the Lower East Side.
Well, let's
they
bring
would
Victor in here.
They would not file a complaint.
Victor, I'm sorry, your partner, you know, we were interested in this. But Victor, you and I have been through a lot of this. Khalif Browder. I've got a video that we did with Khalif Browder's brother.
Yes.
His mother's on this, so let's run that, and we're going to show you a 16-year-old that went through all the problems that each of us have been exposed to, and he didn't know what to say. It was his first night out. He definitely didn't have a record or any exposure to life, really. At 16, I mean, his brother had been in a few scrapes where he had done something and he was innocent and they want him to plead too. But everybody gets into this jam where they get in the prison, they get in Rikers Island, and they say plead guilty and we'll let you go. And now Khalif hadn't done anything wrong, so he was adamant about admitting to something. Why should I admit to something I didn't do? And it was, of all things, a backpack, almost as bad as Eric Garner over cigarettes. But yeah, let's run that video on Khalif Browder, the Browder video. I think his item, I forgot what number it is. Do you have the number there, Browder? The video? That's heavy, man.
When he came out, he was not the same. There was too much baggage he brought from Rikers with him. The memory of beatings, starvation. There was times when he wasn't even allowed to take a shower for 2 weeks. He was angry. He started getting real paranoid. And his life just spiraled from that. My name is Venita Browder, and I'm the mother of Khalif Browder. Khalif was on his way home. A police car stopped, and I'm assuming the guy who made the complaint was in the car and told the police that Khalif had robbed him of a backpack. Khalif kept saying, I don't know this guy, I didn't rob him. He was told that they were gonna just go to the precinct to kind of sort things out. Well, that sorting out took 3 years. We went to court. We had a legal aid. And the legal aid told me from the beginning that it was a BS case. He said, don't worry about it, it's a BS case. But meanwhile, my son is being held at Rikers.
No bail.
He would tell me things when I would visit him about being beat. He told me, Ma, I gotta fight. If I don't, they're gonna think I'm soft. I gotta fight. All it did for Khalif was get him in more trouble and more days in solitary. Imagine being locked up 23 hours a day. This is your life. 4 walls, that's it. He couldn't take it. They told him, we're gonna break you. That's what they told my baby, that they're gonna break him. And in reality, they did. At first, you could see he was relieved, that he was home, he could do what he wanted. He started Bronx Community, and he was doing okay, but then, he was really out of it, and he couldn't keep it up. He quit. He felt that everybody was out to get him. Everybody was a police plant. He stopped speaking to friends. He would get real angry. And then there were times where he would this look would come over him, and he would just stare. It was a Saturday morning. It was just me and Khalif. And I hear him upstairs doing all this moving around. And I'm like, maybe Khalif is positioning the furniture to get comfortable. I didn't pay attention because when Khalif is upset, he paces. Then all of a sudden I heard this boom. I run upstairs. I didn't see anything. I ran into the next room, and the air conditioning cover was kicked out, and I just saw something hanging. I ran back downstairs, and as I opened the backyard door, Khalif was hanging there. I miss my son. I miss him so much.
Now, Victor, this is a show we did with his brother. I'll send the whole show to you. But we had to sit there and watch this with his brother sitting next to us. And that put us all into tears, watching a mother talk about a child and not knowing what to say. This poor kid really went through it. And we all know it and feel it. I just want everybody to feel her pain. That's her baby being beat, and that's a hell of a story for all of us to feel. And appreciate us waking up every morning and having some knowledge of how to deal with things like this. At 16 and not being very aware of outside world, and a loving mother like that, I mean, my God.
She had a heart condition too. Khalif's mother had a heart condition.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And that was the first time she let him go out
Oh.
after dark to go to a birthday party for a classmate.
Oh.
And he never came home. And there were 32 court appearances on this case. The Bronx DA, Robert Johnson, is one of the worst people ever in government.
Mm.
How can you have 32 appearances on a simple case like this and the DA is not ready? How is it that you have a young man who's 16, his first arrest, and he can't get bail? He's detained because his family cannot afford the bail. It's his first offense. There's no prior record.
I thought he had bail, but his father wouldn't put up for it because his father thought he was guilty.
No, I know the father became a problem after he died, but
Okay.
you know, he never should have been in Rikers
Right.
as a first-time offender at age 16. And then to have the DA not be ready, 32, 33 appearances, and they're not ready, and the judge doesn't throw the case out? I never went to court unprepared. Never did.
Mm-hmm.
I never had a case thrown out.
Mm-hmm.
I lost one trial in my entire career, one. But how is it that you claim you have a complainant, a victim of a crime, but you're not ready?
Mm.
And that same assistant DA, well, let me not say that.
Mm-hmm.
But Johnson has failed the community of the Bronx when he was the DA. He failed the community in the Amadou Diallo case.
Don't.
He failed them in this one. There are multiple cases where his office was just dysfunctional.
Let's have Victor hasn't had much to say, but you were on that show, Victor. Tell us how you feel about this.
I talk enough. That's why I be quiet sometimes, especially when there's another platform. So thank you once again. And I want to just give a quick plug and an update. So the release of the Vanita and Khalif Browder story happened a week ago. There's a documentary that was done by this videographer. Her name is Cesar Bueno. And I actually went to the red carpet screening at the Tribeca Film Festival. I'm in the movie also, movie documentary. There's a few clips of me. But this documentarian, she worked on this for 8 years. And now it is actually completed, and we just screened it for the first time last week. It should be coming out, I guess, to actual theaters sometime soon, first and foremost. Secondly, right, and this is why, the work that Mauricia does is so important, especially with, providing information with regards to levels of stop and how to respond in the event you happen to be faced with those type of circumstances. And oftentimes, like I say, and especially in our communities, and we speak about how we are policed as compared to other communities and stuff like that there, and lacking appropriate information in regards to circumstances and how to respond or what the police cannot do, like I mentioned, often sometimes ends up badly for us, and most times we run up on Rikers Island. I heard Graham speaking about, when you have the right to walk away, and, especially if it's not within parameters of the level of stops, right? And actually, to add a little bit more to that, I remember while I was incarcerated and I was doing some legal research work, and I came across this case where, a guy, he had been arrested and he was actually appealing his case, right? He had got, I don't know, maybe 5 years or whatever the case may be. And in the contents of reading this law case, there was a particular section that really struck out for me when they actually said, based upon what the circumstances were regarding to when the police tried to stop him, and he ran away. He ran away. And I read in the law book, there were certain components to that, and the courts agreed that, yeah, he did have the right to run away, and he ran away. Right? And this is a guy who actually think he did commit the crime, right? But it was something with regards to how they stopped him or whatever the case may be, and he winds up in custody. But in the body of the law that he was using, they actually agreed that he had the right to run away. So this speaks to some of the things that heard said, some things that you said, Graham, in regards to how people can respond when you're faced with these types of stops. But more importantly, for our communities, in terms of like how we interact with the police in comparison to other communities, right, has a lot to do with how they treat us. And you spoke to that, Graham, about them not knowing you as an officer, and you wanted to see how they treated you. And if you gauge that, then if they treat you like that, how are they treating other people in the community that oftentimes ends up badly? Because if people do not know their rights and that do not know what they can and cannot do, oftentimes winds up either in a conviction or being detained pre-trial, and then comes the plea agreement. Here we go back to Khalif, right? That they will offer you a plea so you can get out, and most of the time from the trauma of being on Rikers Island,
Yeah.
and as you indicated about the court appearances, right? And they get you up 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and, sit you in the bullpen at the facility. Then you got to wait for the transport bus, and you go to the courthouse and you're sitting in the back of the bullpen, and you move from floor to floor based upon what part your case is being held in, and then do not see a judge. Number one, you know what I'm saying? They do this for a couple of weeks. You ready to cop out. Ready to cop out.
Yeah.
So to me, all of this
get
kind
out
of
of
sort of like works hand in hand in how the police polices our communities up, but also in terms of us not having that important information as Marcia has shared, and how to respond to this, or even being able to articulate that you know your rights. Once they see and hear that you know your rights, outcomes definitely are different. Definitely are different. So this is why platform and information and this type of stuff is important for our community, especially for our youth, to be aware to these types of situations, because our kids is like, they kind of emotional, and if the police said something to them, that they feel they were disrespected, or either their manhood or womanhood was challenged, they're going to respond differently. But with this information, I think that this is something that can kind of sort of like be a buffer between you going to jail and you not going to jail, because you know your rights and you can articulate those rights. And once they are aware that you know your rights, believe me, you are treated much differently. And I know, Graham, from your experience, you can speak to that in terms of people knowing their rights and people not knowing their rights, and what happens when a person does not know their rights and they respond a different way, as opposed to a person who do know their rights and can articulate these rights. Yeah. So this is important, and that's why I work with people like Marcia.
I just like to live one little note on that. The law of the street is never run from the cops, because you sure enough might get shot. I was a kid, man. Of course you ran from the cops because you had a chance to get away. But if they stop you, you don't run.
I only had one guy get away from me on a foot race. He had a head block. He had a block head start. So anybody else, I always caught them. But Morrissey.
You tracked them down, huh?
Oh
You
yeah,
tracked them
I
down?
ran track. So
The track started.
run as
right?
far as you want to run. We'll be right there. You know.
Well, you know, one thing else I want to cover with Marcia is about the cameras. So I'm going to run this video of Robert Brooks.
Yes.
These people were caught because the camera was on and they thought it was off. Run the Robert Brooks one. I think it's item 3. It's labeled Robert Brooks. The one with no audio.
We need to do a slight narration on this here while it's running.
Sure.
This shows them in the infirmary of the Marcy Correctional Facility after he was transferred from the Mohawk Correctional Facility. And this is where you're supposed to be going for medical assessment to see if you have any illnesses or damages that you need to be treated.
Mhm.
And this is what they did to him while he was handcuffed behind his back. So what you're seeing is the officers in the infirmary. Of course, you see how they are manhandling him, right? And then you'll see at certain intermittent parts, they begin to beat him. See the officer got his foot on his throat. That officer had his foot on his throat while he was sitting in the chair. And the other officers continue to hold him down. But the man is handcuffed behind his back.
And this guy looks like he's 300 some odd pounds.
Yeah, he's a big dude.
And he wasn't resisting, and as far as I can tell, he was not resisting in any shape, form, or fashion, but they continued to beat him as though he was resisting in some type of form or fashion. And the man was handcuffed behind. See the police are beating him, hitting him.
And how much did Robert Brooks, he might have been 150, 160 pounds.
Yeah, about he looks about that.
Yeah.
And now you'll probably see as they begin to progress, they're going to shackle his feet. The man is already handcuffed. He's not resisting. He's almost half beat unconscious at this particular point. When they brought him into the infirmary, he was almost half unconscious. And now they're going to shackle his feet, as if his feet going to stop them from beating him like they're doing now. And you see they're still holding him down.
These are not medical personnel. These are correctional officers.
No, these are correctional officers. You're going to see, if they show that piece, if we got enough piece, you're going to see the 2 nurses at the facility standing outside of this exam room looking, and you can see them laughing while they're doing what they're doing. Now, you see the man is not even moving now. He's almost not even responding.
There is a law requiring medical personnel to report the abuse.
And they were there. Now you see him now, look at him. He's almost half unconscious. Look at his nose. His nose is, now remind you, they just brung him there, and they brung him out of the van with a bloody nose. So you know what happened to him in the van as he was on his way to Marcy Correctional Facility.
So he's in prison.
Yes,
he's already incarcerated. He was being transferred from another correctional facility. Look, they still beating him. He's not resisting. He's not doing anything. He was transferred from another facility to Marcy Correctional Facility and taken directly to the infirmary.
See, without the audio, you would think maybe he's saying something, and without the audio, you would think, they could say that he was saying this and saying that.
Look at him. You can see the man is almost half unconscious now from the beating that he received before he even got there.
Okay.
Look at him. Look at him. He's almost gone already.
Yeah.
Now look how they're grabbing him. Look how they're holding him up, because at this point he could not stand up by himself.
And now they didn't know the camera was on.
No, they thought the camera was off because it was Well, Mauricia knows more about the technical part of how the cameras operate, but they thought it was off and it was, in standby or whatever mode that was, and it records in clips. And I guess it's time, the way it's organized is in time. But go ahead, Mauricia. I'll let you take this because I'm not a
Of
techno
course.
professional.
So, when we see law enforcement, most times we think that color coding goes based on like traffic lights,
Yeah.
but it's not the same. So there's green lights that we've seen. I'm not sure if you guys have seen green lights or red lights. The green light is more so of a standby, like it's on, but it's on standby. So it doesn't mean it's actively recording. You would think based on color coding of lights, green means go, green would mean recording. It's actually not. So it's on, it's just on standby mode. However, there's two different reds. There's red solid and there's red blinking. The red solid means that it's on, it just needs one more tap to activate for it to be basically pre-recording and in recording mode. When it comes to the recording, it's going blinking red, but it's catching it in lapses on its own.
That's
The
what this
red
is.
solid light now, I'm sorry, the red solid light, yes, means that it's standby. So if I made a mistake, the blinking means that it's active recording. Standby means it's red solid.
So,
Okay.
So in Roberts Brooks' scenario, I try not to watch the video as much because it was very traumatizing. Even now, like put my head down because it's just a lot. I still have a loved one inside, and we
Ooh.
know that yes, ever since Roberts Brooks' situation, we've been had eyes on, but we have extra eyes. However, I still don't feel as comfortable with the incarceration system, so I didn't really look, but I'm sure that they thought it was red solid and it was actually red blinking. And that's how it caught it in all those different loops.
no, I was totally confused with that. I'm a cameraman, and you said the green was not recording. I mean, anybody could. I mean, I'm glad they got confused, and it was recording all this. But all the stuff we don't see, that's what's so amazing. And all these years when they didn't have cameras, can you imagine what happened?
Going back
Even
to
during
Rodney
your
King.
ear.
Yeah, we didn't have cameras.
Yeah.
And going back to Rodney King, that's
Oh,
almost
God.
30 years ago.
How many?
And yet, even with video, we struggled to get convictions. Thank
And-
God
and
in
we've gotta
Minnesota
go.
with George Floyd, we got a conviction.
And thank you for coming today. We've had a good time. Informational time. And reviewing the ills of the past. And we've got the future that we're more armed and ready to fight anything that happens.
Our organization.
Go ahead.
What's your organization again? Marcia? Yes. Oh, we can't. We got no sound.
All right.
Can't hear you.
I think it's time to go.
No, the Office of the Community Liaison.
Office of the Community Liaison. Thank you.
I think we're at 58. All right. The God in me loves the God in you. Stay tuned of more. Stay tuned.
Thank you.
More of the Gilchrist experience. And thank you guys for coming today. We're going to do more
Thank
of
you
this.
for having me.
Good to see you, Graham, and thank you,
Good to see
Marcia.
you. Thank
See
you
you at the
both.
next platform.
Yes.
All right.
Peace out.
God bless. God bless.